Kat? Yeah.
Thank you, Kat. I will. Yeah, I'll just kick us off, and then you guys are the main show. So, good morning, everyone. It's still morning, right? It is. It is. And so, I'm Jess Bax, Division Director for Developmental Disabilities, if I have not met you. And I wanted to talk through a little bit of the history of kind of what brought us here today for context, and then leave most of the time for these wonderful ladies to fill you in on all of the great new things about our updated process and how things are going to work and be more streamlined now. But if you remember back in 2000, well, we'll say more than 10 years ago, BC, before COVID, we had a regulation that came out, and it was very, we had always had, as developmental disabilities, a lot of focus on individual rights and making sure that we had community access and inclusion. But in that final regulation from CMS, there was a lot of additional specific regulatory language put in around what does that mean? How do we define an individual's rights and that process? How do we define making sure that we have community inclusion? So a lot of people remember it as the settings rule. There was a lot more information actually in that, that final regulation. And so I think at that time, most states really had to do a lot to update what they were doing to be in compliance. And we do what we often do in state government, and we do that with what we already have in our existing resources, and didn't get any new staff with that regulation, any new money, neither did providers to comply. So we've kind of been living in that for a decade and through a public health emergency and a workforce crisis. And so about 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, we worked with our partners at the General Assembly to say, hey, we've got the HCBS Enhanced FMAP dollars, and the majority of that went to rates and standardizing rates. And what we also did, though, was we had some enhancements to the program, and that was really how can we take some of this funding that is going to help us really make sure that we are getting an updated, more streamlined process for what has become really a pain point for a lot of people because of the fact that we are trying to implement all of these requirements with no additional staff or funding. And so I think that due process has been one of those pain points for everyone, because it is something where it kind of seems like it's the case manager versus the provider versus maybe the guardian sometimes, and everybody has kind of a different idea, and there's nobody there who really is set to be the expert. There's no streamlined, centralized process, and so that was the impetus for this partnership. So there's been a lot of great feedback from our case management partners, from our provider partners over the past year, and as our great partners at Columbus, who work with a lot of other states to do this, and our internal team worked at updating the process. We really wanted to take a look at how can we improve the experience for all of our stakeholders and make sure that everybody has the right support that they need and can understand a more simplified way to go about this, at the same time maintaining compliance. So that's kind of everything that brought us here today, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate your patience as we work to get to improved processes and a better place on many of these different things that are a part of the HCBS world. So with that, I will turn it over to my friends Lori and Rochelle, and let you all have a great webinar.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate you hopping on.
You bet.
All right, we will go ahead and get started with today's training. I'm Rochelle Moffitt, and I'm the Quality Program Specialist State Lead, and also presenting is Lori. And Lori is the Due Process Review Coordinator with the Columbus organization.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everybody see that okay? Yes, perfect. Thank you. All right. So with the procedure comes some enhancements. And we're going to talk about the objectives of the Due Process Review Committee as well as those enhancements. But for today's purpose, the objective is to review the new due process review procedure. And this procedure is going to replace the Division Directive 4.200. As part of that new procedure, we also have a sub-procedure that references those emergency due process referrals and reviews. So we'll walk through that process. And then we will also walk through the process and do a live demonstration on how to submit a referral using the new online referral database and how to submit that referral to the DPRC. So with the new procedure comes some of the enhancements that you can see here on the screen. The first enhancement that we're doing is a centralized due process review committee, which will be conducted by the Columbus organization. So there will no longer be due process review committees at the regional offices or provider committees. And the due process review committee, like I mentioned earlier, will talk about the just your typical routine referrals, annual reviews, as well as those emergency restrictions. And this is something that we haven't had yet. So we're pretty excited for this new procedure. With the emergency procedures, it's going to be that review of those imposed restrictions that are due to those emergency circumstances where there's an immediate imminent threat of harm to the individual or others. And the service provider, they will implement the intervention in order to keep the person or others safe. Then that service provider will notify the guardian if applicable, as well as the service coordinator. Then a member of that individual's team, whether it's the service provider, the support coordinator, will make that referral into the new referral system. And then, of course, the new process of making referral will be done via the online due process review committee referral system. And then we are also implementing the individual rights consultation process. You'll also hear us refer to IRC when we talk about individual rights consultation. And there is an upcoming webinar on September 10th that will walk you guys through that process, as well as how to make a request using the REDCap system. So when an individual is receiving an HCBS waiver service and the planning team determines that a modification of rights is necessary, the team ensures that due process has occurred and is documented. So this documentation will be referred to the Due Process Review Committee as well as incorporated into the individual's ISP or in an amendment if needed. And it is to be clearly identified what the right restriction is, as well as the required components. The individual, any member of their team, division staff, or the person's advocate can submit a referral for due process. And that due process referral system will automatically submit the referral to Lori with the Columbus Group. So the referral must include all due process components, and we'll go into more detail later in this webinar when we're doing the live demonstration on what those components are. But we wanted to provide just a screenshot, a quick reference of the required due process components.
Okay, I'm up. Alrighty. going to describe now the procedures that my office will follow once a referral has been received. The first thing is even before we see anything, my office will receive an automated message as soon as any referral form has been submitted. And then I will pull that up and take a look at number one, do we have all of the components, all the specific due process components addressed? If they're not, then I'm going to get back in touch with whoever submitted the referral. And also, I will, through REDCap, send a referral for an individual rights consultation so those folks can assist the submitter in getting it correct. And next slide. I don't know if I can do it or you guys have to do it. Thank you. All right. Also during this pre-review period, if there is any potential prohibited practice that is included within the restriction, then I immediately return that to whoever submitted that. And I also make a referral to the BAT folks for them to make a determination about whether it's a prohibited practice or not. Next. Now, if the referral is complete, it's got all of the components that were needed, if they referred to a document, let's say the person's behavior support plan or ISP, do we have that information that was included? But when it's complete, then I will assign that case to one of the three committees, notify the chair, schedule the meeting, and of course, prior to any committee meeting, my office will redact any personal identifying information before it gets to the committee. Okay, now also, when I first take a look at a package, a referral packet, want to make sure that there's documentation that the individual has been notified about the restriction, that they've been given the opportunity to be assisted through external advocacy if the person disagrees with the restriction, and that the person has been informed on how their rights can be restored. If these haven't happened, again, my office will make a referral for an individual rights consultation to help out the submitter. Okay, now, and I know there's been a little bit of confusion with some waiver providers. When a meeting is going to be scheduled, my office will certainly notify the individual. If they have a guardian, we notify the guardian. We will notify their support coordinator, but we will also notify the individual waiver providers that are providing services for the person. Had a couple of instances we run into where the residential provider was present, but the day services provider was not present, and in fact, the restrictions did apply while the person was receiving day services. Another point I want to make here is even though these are virtual meetings, we need to make sure that we make these meetings as accessible and available to individuals, to guardians. And when we go through the live demonstration, there's actually a section on the referral form that will address this specifically. We are hoping to have as many individuals themselves be present in these meetings, and for guardians, other folks who are who advocate for that person. But we really want to make a push for that individual to be involved to the degree that they so prefer. Okay. Okay. All righty. Now, as Rochelle mentioned, these components of due process are what support coordinator, whomever else is submitting a referral, will need. We need information on this because the committee, each DPRC, is going to be looking at each one of these specific components and to see whether criteria has been met or not. Some of the things that may look a little different from those of you who have been working with this. We have very clearly separated out that one of the due process components, which is that there's an assurance that the interventions and supports aren't going to cause harm to the person. That used to be part of the monitoring methods section. When we get to the form, you'll see we've split this out, and we'll talk about what that assurance is really all about and what we expect from that. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. After the review, each chair is going to record whatever the committee findings, their determinations, if those due process components meet criteria, and that is for each restriction. They will record their findings, send those along to me, and then I will enter into the system. And if there is a need for an individual rights consultation, then that's what we'll make sure a referral is sent out for that. And next, again, all committee findings, folks will be notified. Actually, I think it's 5 business days. We changed it to not 3 business days. And there will be notification of what the committee determined to the individual, to the guardian, service providers, SC, and any other folks that are involved. Could be an advocate or whomever. Okay, next one, I think, Rochelle, you can talk about exemptions. I said that wrong.
Yes, okay. So there are a few exemptions where a due process review is not required. And as you can see on the screen, it's individuals who are recipients of a forensic case monitoring service with court-ordered restrictions. So if the forensic case monitor implements a right restriction, it does not need to be reviewed by DPRC, as the court serves as due process. Forensic case monitors, they have the authority to impose additional limitations or restrictions if necessary to facilitate compliance with court-ordered rights restrictions. Court orders also do not require due process review committee. Prior to issuing a court order, the court system has certain due process protections it must follow. This includes notice, opportunity to be heard, and other due process considerations. The team should still note the court order in the ISP, and every year during review, document continued efforts to work with the individual and guardian to review any restrictions in place, discuss whether the restrictions remain appropriate, and any additional next steps if deemed inappropriate. Next on our list is youth and child-specific agreements funded through Children's Division do not require due process review. Restrictions imposed in the family home by natural support or family members are not required to go through due process. staff may provide a division-funded service to the individual in the home, but they must not engage in a practice or utilize any device that imposes a restriction during the delivery of services. And this does not preclude staff from their mandated report or responsibilities if they feel that restriction could be considered abuse and neglect. And we often get another question around remote supports. And the question typically is, are remote supports rights limitation and require due process? And that answer is no. Last year, during the renewal of the waiver services, remote supports became its standalone service. And so just like any other waivered service, by nature, remote supports are not restrictive and do not require due process review. However, just like with any other service, if there's a limitation being imposed during the receipt of that service, that would need to be reviewed by due process. For example, if an individual is receiving remote services, however, the refrigerator is locked up during that time, that locked refrigerator is still a rights restriction and would need to have a due process review.
Right. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the key enhancements to the due process review system. And that is for there to be a subsystem that can quickly respond to restrictions that are put in place due to true emergencies. And the definition that we have up here on the screen, these are restrictions that are imposed due to emergency circumstances where there is an imminent threat of harm to the individual or others. And that means to an imminent threat of harm to that person, something that is unexpected, unplanned for, but we have to keep people safe. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And these are true case examples. One situation, there was a waiver participant who lived in a group home who had overdosed on illegal substances. And while he was in the emergency room, he let staff know that he had more drugs in his room at the group home. And he locked his room. So while he's at the hospital, the provider said, okay, he says we have, that he has fentanyl and other scary drugs in the house. And you don't have time to get the team together immediately or call a DPRC meeting. So, but you need to do something. And the person still needs to be afforded due process. So let's say that in a case like that, where provider needs to get into that room, make sure, there are other people living in that house who could be at risk of harm. And first thing, of course, that they did is make sure that, the person was in the ER, he was being taken care of, and you've got notifications, guardian and support coordinator, and then either the support coordinator or the provider can submit through the online system an emergency referral. And that goes differently than a regular referral. So if we go to the next slide, first thing, and you'll see this when we demonstrate the referral form, there is an actual section that asks, is this an emergency referral? And if it is, then it goes a totally different path. my office will convene an ad hoc review panel within 72 hours of being notified of the restriction. Be a virtual meeting, and that review panel is made up of either 3 DPRC chairs or 2 DPRC chairs and the coordinator, myself. And then we go through the following pieces in terms of our review. Is it justified? Is there a plan for immediate action, like a safety crisis plan? What are the conditions of when the restriction is going to be applied? Informed consent. Definitely the assurance that the intervention will cause no harm. Assurance that the intervention is not a prohibited practice. And then what's the date of the date of the next team meeting that obviously needs to occur, and timelines for when the real or whole referral will go for DPRC review. So another example of an emergency, there's a person who has broken a CD case and cut herself with the edges of the plastic, and cut herself and injured herself quite severely. Probably not a good idea for that person to have direct access to sharps in the middle of a crisis. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. After the review panel has met and made their determination, then within 48 hours, my office will make notifications to the support coordinator, to the service provider, etc. And of course, make a referral through REDCap for individual rights consultation. Seeing lots of questions in the chat. Can't wait to see the full summary.
Yes, I see those popping up.
They keep popping up, right? Keep them coming. We need this. Okay. I'm going to walk through this this process flow, even though there are a couple things we're going to be adding to it. And once it is totally complete, this will also be posted on the web page. So starting on left-hand side of the page, my office receives that notification that a referral has been received, and my office will check to see, are all the required sections complete? If they are, we jump down. Are there any possible prohibited practices identified? If there aren't any of those, we just swing over, and my office will schedule, we'll do all the prep work, of course, but then schedule the review. And after the review, we notify the committee, etc. Now, let's take it a different way. Let's say that the referral form is not complete. So we've got a no, our first no, and that's going to take us to my office, getting back in touch with the submitter of the referral about the missing information. And at the same time, I will refer that to for an individual rights consultation. And then it'll go to the IRC process, and then it cooks all the way around. We are going to add some other pink boxes because there are some points in here where the referral will be closed, and folks will be starting over. So I know there's a lot of detail on this. We'll try to make sure that it's very viewer friendly before we get it posted up on the website. Okay, moving right along, Rochelle.
So before we get into the live demo of the referral form, we wanted to list out some helpful hints here on a slide that you can reference back to. So as you can see here, the recommended browser is either Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome. We are in the process of developing a user guide for the referral form, and it will be housed on the same webpage that the referral form link will be housed. And so we strongly encourage everybody before you go in to make a referral to pull up that user guide, look through what information is needed, gather that information, and then go in and start submitting your referral. The referral system is a public facing referral system. That way, anyone is able to make a referral. It's not someone that is only a contracted provider or DMH staff. This is so that if there's an advocate for the individual and they want to make a referral, let's say the guardian wants to make a referral, you know, we had to create it so that anyone can access the referral form. So with that, there is also a timeout session, and it's 60 minutes. So it does give you quite a bit of time to work through the referral form. And when we first get into the referral form, it's going to look like, wow, you're requesting a lot of information. But all of that information should already be identified in the plan. So you can copy and paste information directly from a Word document into the database so that it helps, you know, save time and not having to retype everything that you've already typed up in the ISP. However, as long as you're working and you're navigating through the referral form, it will not time out on you. But if, let's say you're in section 1 of the referral form, you get a phone call, somebody interrupts you, you know, in some way, and you leave that setting idle for 60 minutes without navigating to the next, then you're going to lose all of that information that you entered. And if you do not hit save and finish and submit prior to closing out your browser, you'll also lose everything that you've entered. So it's really important to gather that information, look through that user guide, make sure that you have it all there, and then work through the referral form in one complete session.
And one other thing to mention is, first off, there are all sorts of different templates that are used by different SCs to submit information. And some of them include, when you come to the sections, you know, to explain the justification and the other due process components, some have simply said, given us an ISP page number to refer to. That is not acceptable. You can copy and paste, but we really need to have all of that together as part of that review form, referral form. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Lori. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the individual rights and due process page. So in order to find this, this page on the DMH website, you're going to go to the developmental disabilities page and then scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen. And then you'll, underneath the popular sections, you'll see the tab for quality programs. So you'll click on that tab. And then this next screenshot are all the different areas that are listed under the quality programs. And in that middle column, you can see there at the bottom is the individual rights and due process webpage. So when you click on that, here is a screenshot of what that individual rights and due process page looks like. Once the system goes live, underneath the due process review committee referral ribbon is where you will find the link for the referral form. And we will be sure to communicate that out once it goes live. So we're going to go ahead and move into the referral form. And for today's training, I'm going to use the test site. Right. Lori, can you tell me, can you see the referral form?
I can.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
All right. So while I navigate the screens, Lori is going to walk us through on how to submit a referral.
Okay. So obviously we need your first and last name, and we need a valid email address and phone. And we have the reCAPTCHA. Make sure that you're not a robot. One of the secure cybersecurity features that has been built in. Okay. Then we will have a DMH ID of the person, their first and last name, and their date of birth. So we're working with Mr. Duck here. And just to let you know, when a referral comes into the system, the Missouri IT folks will, what they have to do first is they have to verify the name and ID. They have to make sure that they match in the system. Once they've done that, then they send it on to us. Okay, so no nickname, preferred pronoun, he, him, if you have that for somebody. There you go. Okay. Now, when I was talking about the emergency referral, okay, and just say, is this being submitted because we have an emergency restriction or not? So we're going to say this is not an emergency. Okay, so this is going to go through just the regular due process referral process. So we need the name of the person's support coordinator and their email and phone. And we have a drop down to identify which region the individual is served in. Okay. Now we're going to come down to the person's legal status. And that's also did we miss legal status? There we go. Okay. This person has a guardian. And then we need the name of the guardian, their email address, if they are or are not a public administrator. And there we go. And we got a phone number. All righty. Now, I want to make a real point here about identifying the person or persons who will be presenting the referral to the committee. We have had committee meetings when we didn't have either a support coordinator or we had a support coordinator, but we didn't have a provider who really wanted to present. The committee can only go by paper if they don't have someone that they can ask questions of. So it's important that we know who's actually going to be presenting this during the meeting. Okay, now, meeting needs, and this is for the individual, or it could be for other folks as well. Let's say that this individual has some needs in the area of communication. So we're going to check meeting needs communication. And what we could put, and then we need to describe what that is. And we could say the individual uses sign language and will need someone to be able to translate, communicate, facilitate the discussion with them, or something along those lines. Okay. Now we're going to identify the waiver services that they receive. Got a drop down for living arrangement. Let's pick group home for this one. And provider name, ABC Group Homes, or what, whatever. We got lots of names to choose from, right, guys? And then, of course, their phone. A lot of folks don't have any other living services. And then we'll have the provider address and email. Okay. And then we do the same thing in terms of employment and day services providers. And we have a drop down. Okay. And some folks may have different, day service providers or employment providers.
Quick, I don't remember if we mentioned that anything that has this red asterisk by it, you have to have some kind of data entered or the system will not let you advance to the next screen.
Right. Right. And none is always a choice. So, okay. Then we want to get a sense of what other services the person is receiving. And on this list, why don't we check off speech therapy? The person has some communication needs, so we'll check that off. And if they have any state plan services, then, but here we'll say none because they don't. Okay. Now, one thing that we are requiring is a list of all of the individual's current diagnoses, not just the qualifying diagnoses for eligibility for IDD services. So we would certainly have things regarding, or for lots of folks, we're going to have things regarding level of intellectual disability, other specific developmental disabilities, but also the person may have gastric ulcers or flat feet or all sorts of things. We need all of the diagnoses. And then when we have that completed already, I think we have, yep, there we go. Again, the submitter is there, and save and continue. And then we're going to move on to the second section. Now, for each individual restrictions within a referral, there will be a separate restriction page. Okay, so let's start with the type of restriction. And oh golly, let's see. Let's do media. Okay. Restriction status. You have choices. Either it's a new one or it is an existing restriction that's come for re-review. We'll have this one as a new one. Now, if it had been an existing review, if you look over to the right, either we need the date that it was first implemented or the number of years it has been in place. And I'll tell you, one of the things that the committees are certainly going to be paying a great deal of of attention to is if you have someone who has had certain restrictions in place for a long time, okay, few years, several years, that has to be looked at very, very carefully. The overall right that every waiver participant has is the right to the least restrictive alternatives for services and supports. And sometimes we take a look at referrals where someone's had the same restriction for 7 years. Well, doesn't seem like it's been real effective. What's going on? Okay, so we move down to the next drop down. Referral status, again, this is a new case. Okay. And then we need to identify, is the restriction of this person due to the behavior of a housemate? In this example, we're going to say no. Okay. However, if in fact a restriction is being imposed on someone not because they have a problem or an issue in safely exercising a right, but because they live with someone who does have a problem with safely and responsibly exercising a right, that's a problem because it's simply not fair and or justified to restrict the right of one person due to the behavior of somebody else. So in this case, we're going to say, nope, this doesn't have anything to do with it. But if in fact you would answer this yes, then we need a description below of, what the situation is. Here's one example. Let's say that you have 3 folks who live together, and one of those people has a real hard time handling food intake, and has had all sorts of problems with that. And the provider has decided to lock the fridge, lock the freezer, lock the cupboards. Well, unless the provider has ensured that the other folks in the house that don't have a problem still have free access to food when they want, then it's a problem, and we can't justify that restriction for the person who doesn't have a problem with it. So, and we'll be, I'm sure, talking more about that, and we've talked a lot about that in the committees over the last almost year and a half. Okay, so in this case, we're saying, nope, doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. It's just a restriction involving this individual. So we are going to obviously describe what the restriction is. And in this case, this is a media restriction. And with this individual, the restriction is access to his iPad, laptop, gaming devices that can only be used during set hours. We're only going to allow him to use this, 2 hours a day or something like that. Okay. Now, let's start to, there's a great question that just came up in chat. We're going to have a wonderful FAQ response for you guys. Okay. So, on the section for justification, purpose, and rationale, the very first thing that we need is the identification for this person of what the specific assessed need is. Okay. and the reason. So let's say that this individual, Mr. Duck, just has a real hard time putting down electronics, likes gaming, likes all sorts of stuff. And sometimes he does this for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours, doesn't get enough sleep, etc. And so they're saying, this is a need. Okay. And the real reason of why the restrictions being put in place, it could be concern about his health, it could be concern about he does those things and doesn't do his own grooming and hygiene and chores. We see a lot of that. Okay. Now, the third piece here is absolutely critical. Okay. You must be able to document the less intrusive or less restrictive things that you've tried to meet the need. Okay. And not just, we try it and it didn't work, but we systematically tried something and it didn't work. We have reviewed many issues with, excuse me, the air quality in St. Louis is under warning right now. My apologies. We've seen many cases where the less intrusive methods were, well, we talked to him and that didn't work. No, we're really talking about other things that we've tried, given a good try, and they weren't effective. The other thing is we need some history. We need to know what's occurred that has prompted this proposed need for a restriction. If this is a plan that's been in place, what kind of progress has the person made or lack of progress? We need some data on how things have gone. And we really need to know if this restriction is truly needed to keep the person safe or other people safe. So we're looking for all of those pieces. All right. Now let's move to next component, which is teaching or support strategies. Now, one thing that you all should keep in mind is restrictions are temporary. They are intended to be temporary, and that the person can develop skills or other supports are in place so that the person will not need to have the restriction over time. So depending on how restrictive the intervention is, those teaching and support strategies need to be at least as robust or more robust so the person, has a good shot of being able to exercise that right again. So we need to, what kinds of things are being taught to the person to help them develop these skills? Are there outcomes, objectives within the person's ISP or within a behavior support plan that describes these? And do we know that this kind of thing has worked in the past, or is there another way that this person might learn better? And everything needs to be in the ISP. Okay, everything. The supports identified, teaching teaching strategies, etc. And of course, we need to know who's going to be doing this training, who's going to be working with the staff to be able to implement those strategies. Okay, coming down to conditions. And this is, are we going to impose this restriction only in the person's home during certain hours? Are we going to impose this in community settings where the person works or where they participate in day services? If it's within the home, but only in certain rooms in the home, needs to be very, very specific. And it's pretty clear when you pick one up, and most of these have really gone very, very well, even under our current system, that folks know specifically where we can impose this and where we cannot. Moving down to monitoring. How are we going to know that the modification, the rights modification, is effective? What kind of data is to be collected, and who's going to collect that data? Where are we going to find it? How often are we going to be taking it? And how often is the team going to take a look at it? As well as support coordinators. Now, the next section is something I mentioned earlier that we have split out from the monitoring section. And this is an assurance that the intervention or supports will cause no harm. Well, what risks were considered to say, yes, this will cause no harm, or hey, wait a minute, this is dangerous? In many, if not most of the referrals that we've had over the last year and a half or so, there will just be a sentence that says, this intervention will cause the person no harm. How was that determined? What risks, what attributes of the person, went into that, and where is it documented? Should be in the ISP, because this is a team discussion and determination. So we've kind of split that out for you to be able to discriminate between those two. Okay, here's a hot one. Criteria for restoration. And this is when the team can put together an idea of, all right, what needs to occur either on the individual's part or supports from providers so that the person doesn't have to have this restriction anymore. Has the person developed skills that will, so that they really are not needing the restriction? They're acting differently. They're showing responsibility in things. But the critical part here is that the criteria for restoration needs to be specific, observable, or in specific, observable, and measurable terms. So the example we included here, if, the person can go, 3 months in a row without, trying to take off, then chimes will be removed from the exterior door. A lot of what we're seeing, and something that we seriously want to caution you against, is that a lot of times we will receive a criteria that says the person has to go 12 out of 12 consecutive months with no instances of, and then they'll list either a behavior or a series of behaviors. I've yet to meet anybody who can go a complete year, every single day in a complete year, and maybe, have a bad day or miss something. We need to think about reasonable criteria for restoration. And the other thing is, a lot of times you might say, well, you know what? This really is going to require a year, but we're going to break it up. So let's say that if the person goes a couple of months and they meet criteria, they can have some of that right restored. Maybe they'll have additional hours available to use media in this case, or talk on the phone, or whatever it might be. And then we up the ante a little bit, another couple of months, still performing, we can add some more time. The concept of fading makes so much sense here. We can't expect people to be perfect all of the time. And the other thing is, in some fading plans that we've seen, let's say that they get through, the first step, which is okay for 8 weeks or 3 months or whatever. They'll be perfect. And then in the next period, they've got a problem. They don't meet the criteria. Well, in some plans, they make the person go back all the way to the beginning and start over. Not advised, and certainly not a recipe for success. Okay, now, another thing here, and Rochelle, help me if I get off track, but we do understand that many, many teams face some different opinions from guardians, including PAs, on criteria for restoration. There are some who will say, nope, right's never going to be restored, period, finished, never going to be reduced in its restrictiveness or whatever. Nope, not going to happen. So what do you do? Because that means that this component of due process is not present. So in those cases, Rochelle, you want to run through just real quick what that might look like, and the IRC involvement, et cetera?
Yeah, we can do that. So in a situation like this, if there isn't a component that's addressed, that's missing for various reasons, Lori and her group are going to initiate the individual rights consultation request. That will be funneled back through the regional office quality program lead and the quality program team members at that regional office. A quality programs team member will be assigned to that individual rights consultation and then will contact the person who made the referral to DPRC and try to figure out, what is the best solution in ensuring that all areas of due process is afforded to the individual. It could be initiating a meeting with, the service provider, support coordinator, and the guardian. It could be pulling in other division team members in the help of, coming up with some kind of an agreement. It could be your TCM TAC, your vendor service coordinator. The list is just endless. So we're going to try the best that we can during that individual rights consultation to provide, that assistance to the team so that all areas of due process is afforded. We do have the option of pulling in some central office team members at a point where if the disagreement just continues and there is no remediation. So those are things that will be shared during the individual rights consultation webinar. And then as we roll out that process, we will also be rolling out some sub-procedures that will highlight what it looks like if other team members are brought in.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty, let's move on down to consent. And, the first thing I want to mention is that none of these requirements are new. Okay, we actually have a CSR that states specifically what we need within informed consent. Unfortunately, what I've seen pretty much across the board is that even though an individual or guardian may sign off on the ISP, that does not meet the requirements of consent for the use of restrictive interventions. So let's take a look at the questions here. And this is what the team and the support coordinator certainly, were all of the risks of restrictive interventions reviewed with the person and guardian as part of the consent process, okay? Did they have an opportunity to ask questions? And number 3 is a biggie, guys. Was the person and guardian, were they informed that they may withdraw consent at any time? And then where's the consent documentation? So this is gonna be new. And some agencies or some providers may choose to come up with a separate consent form that includes all of these things, or it can be built into the ISP documentation. But this is going to be something new for folks, even though the requirement isn't new. Move on down to the review schedule. Okay, well, we need to figure out when are we going to look at it? When's the team going to look at it? How often are support coordinators going to be looking at it? How often or when it's going to be submitted to the DPRC? Can't go over a year. And we have a couple things repeated here. We'll fix that. And you guys have all been doing a pretty good job with the review schedules. And you're right. Somebody just put in from connections. You're right. 2 and 4 are duplicative. Then the notice of right to due process, which is the same as what we've said earlier. And pretty much we have a stand pat, it's almost boilerplate notice of right to due process. It's like, yes, well, we've been made aware of them, or we made them aware of it. They have the right to due process. We put in the information on how to contact the Office of Constituent Services. But, you know, it would really be nice to have like dates of when when this occurred, and any other, if there are questions of things, responses from the individual of how they feel about stuff. All of that can go in here as well. So since we have a single restriction that we are referring and don't need to do this for another one, we can hit finished.
So I am purposely going to leave out this required area so that you could see what happens if I hit finish. It gives me a notice. That notice of right to due process is required. So it will not let you move forward without entering information there. And like I had mentioned earlier, you know, all of the components, all elements or due process are part of the individual's ISP. And so if you already have the ISP written in a Word document, you can take all of that information and copy and paste it directly into this form so that you don't have to recopy or retype everything that's already there. So all elements of due process continues to be included in the ISP. There's no changes there, but we're just using this referral system as a notification to Lori and her group. They can pull the required components from this form, redact the information, and this is what's going to be submitted to the Due Process Review Committee for review. So again, all components and elements of due process are still required in the ISP.
Right. Okay.
So I'll go up and I will correct and then hit finished.
And this is what comes up.
You do have this little handy dandy little print option. If you wanted to print the referral form for your records, you can have that also. But then it gives you a snapshot of everything that you've entered. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. You have the option if you forgot to add a piece of information in one of the components, you can click on this. It will take you back so that you can make any changes. If this individual had more than one restriction, so you would use the button add restriction, and then it will take you back to that second section that we just went over regarding the components. There is the option to upload documents. And on the user form, there are some restrictions as far as what type of documents that you can upload. So on that user form, we have included that. But if you wanted to upload a document, you would click Add New Document. It gives you the little restrictions over here to your right. You would click on Document Type. So Safety Crisis Plan, and then upload your file. And then you would click on the green button. Okay. So for today's demonstration, we're not going to upload a file. We're going to return to the referral. Scroll down to the bottom. So if you have all your restrictions identified, everything's ready to go, you've uploaded your documents, you want to make sure you click Finish and Final Submit. That way you know that the referral has been submitted to Lori and her group. Lori, do you want to
when you hit it, it should come up with thank you or something. I can't remember what that screen shows.
Yes, so there is a glitch in the system again, it looks like today. So I will show you real quick. So here is the user guide that we're developing. And once you hit that Finish and Final Submit button, this pop-up display referral submitted, thank you. It will say the individual's name, and then at any point, if you need any kind of technical assistance, here is the email address that you can email and ask. So that's the referral form.
Yeah, and just another hint. When you are completing the narrative sections, that section 2 for the individual restrictions, if you can refer to the individual as opposed to their name, if we can get as much personal identifying information out of it when it's submitted, less time it's going to take for our redaction software. But submit as you will, we'll make sure that it's redacted. Okay. And the reason why there was a glitch here is because we're in the test environment. When you get into it, it will be in the right environment, cyberspace-wise. Okay.
So also wanted to mention that anytime we make a referral, it's going to be a new referral. So let's say you submitted a referral, there were components missing, or all of the areas were not addressed. Lori is going to submit a referral for individual rights consultation and close out that referral form. You'll work with the QPS team in that individual rights consultation. And then once that consultation's been completed and you're ready to resubmit that referral, you'll have to resubmit using a new referral form. So since this is a public facing database, there isn't any kind of login or anything like that. So each referral will have to be a new referral. But there is that option, like we showed in the form, to either select new or a return. So you want to make sure that you, select that appropriate one.
Okay, so moving right along. There we go. Next steps, Rochelle?
Yeah. So what are the next steps? Starting September 12th, 2024, the Columbus organization will start receiving due process referrals. So on September 12th, the referral form will go live and you'll be able to find that in the DMH website, and we'll also send that out too. And then we also have 2 upcoming webinars that are scheduled. There's one scheduled for next week on September 5th, and it is going to be more individual rights and due process training that's going to go into more detail about what are individual rights, what is due process, and then detailed information that the committee is going to be looking for when submitting that referral. So for today's webinar, we showed you how to make a referral, but next week's webinar, we're going to go into more detail of specific use cases and providing those examples of how, the due process components need to be written up.
And that training is really targeted for support coordinators who obviously submit the lion's share of referrals for due process.
Yes, thank you. And then September 10th at 1 p.m., we will be hosting the individual rights consultation procedure and how to make a referral into REDCap. That both of these webinars are already listed on the webinar page on the DMH website, and there has been an email blast to go out to register for both of these trainings. So if you want more detail on due process, be sure to come to that September 5th training. And then again, individual rights consultation is September 10th.
Okay.
All right, Lori, do you want to add anything else?
Just some general statements. We know that we've frequently referred to these changes as enhancements to the due process review system statewide. As seen in the voluminous chats that came through with many, oh, somebody says I need to speak up. Let me fix this a little bit. All right. Yes, there are a number of enhancements, but there are some major changes. And we will work with you to help you understand not just the major points, but nuances that are involved in due process as well. And we're here to support you in every way we can. The overall true mission of any due process review system is, number one, we want to protect and affirm individuals' rights. We want to ensure that individuals' rights to due process are afforded to them. And there's another piece here too that affects the overall system. And that is that as part of being funded by CMS under the HCBS waivers. The state of Missouri has made certain assurances to CMS about performance in all sorts of key indicators of service provision. And one of those is due process. And Missouri hasn't been doing a great job with that. So we're going to try to do whatever we can to support the system so that we can ensure that people are afforded their rights to due process. And that's all I had, Rochelle.
Okay. All right. I don't think I have anything else. So with that,
Well, we certainly thank you so much for your participation. We will be attacking those questions. I was just kind of flipping through as they'd come up, and I know we have a lot of questions in common. And we will get to those just as quickly as we can, and hopefully be able to review all of those before the next webinar.
Great.
Um,
and like Kat, yeah, and like Kat had mentioned in the
I want to thank you all very much and hope to see you at other training soon. Thank you.
Thank you.